Hello, my loves, and welcome back. I'm so excited because we have Hayley Lloyd today. And if you guys are in my world, you know she has been my mentor for, what is it, like a year and a half, almost 2 years now, and blown up my world from the inside out. And of course, I had to have her on to share her genius, share her magic with the world, and dive into this. And if you guys are new to our podcast, it's the Soft and Savage. We talk about the soft side, we talk about the savage side, and how to blend the both as a high achiever that is growing a business and looking to deepen their love lives. And we bring on gorgeous humans like this one today. And if you guys want any more information, make sure you subscribe. But without further ado, we can dive in. Hi, honey.
Oh, hi. We've already almost been crying, like just before this. So
Yeah.
I don't know where this is
No, I'm like, we'll see where it
going.
goes, but I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Before you dive in or anything, do you want to introduce yourself to the people?
Yeah. My name's Hayley, and I am a seven-figure CEO. I teach people to build feminine authority or integrated authority, and that is a blend of outer authority and inner authority. Inner authority is really where a big push of my content and my business is going at the moment. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more, but that essentially just means like building the conviction, the belief, the magnetism, and the capacity within yourself to create everything that you want. There's a really big manifestation lens in there as well. And yeah, I've had this business for coming up to 6 years now, and it is just a complete, heart-led venture that is unfolding every single day. I can never predict what's going to happen the next day. But it's exciting because it leads me to connect with people like Laura, and I'm excited to chat about whatever comes through today. As we were just saying, like, this is just going to be full channeled. Like, who knows? We both got ADHD. It's going about 1,000 different directions.
1,000%, 1,000%. And it's so cool because I found you for what you quote unquote call outer authority. I found you for content. I found you for programs that sell. Like when you were bundling that stuff together, that's when I was in your world because I was like, this genius over here. It's like when she writes, she's in my head, and I kept trying to like watch your stuff, being like, how does she do it? And I'm like, fuck it, let me just pay her to figure out why she does it instead of just trying to fucking watch and like read your emails and like, how does it work? And I'm like, no, let me go into your world and understand it. And what I found is the core element is the inner piece, right? It's actually really hard to just do the outside. And the piece that a lot of us are seeking is the, oh, if I could just make the most perfect funnel and I could have the best copy and I could do this type of stuff, I will somehow become a millionaire. And then you're doing that and you're like, why isn't it working? And the truth is, it's because of this inner authority piece. And so, what led you to this inner authority, outer authority paradigm?
Okay, big question. So I'll go all the way back to when I was in corporate. So I had an 8-year corporate career, and I was very high flying. I was ranked top 1% of designers in the world in 2017 by a company called TopTool. I had a portfolio that people would like pass around and would like show as like an example of who they wanted to work in their teams. I was consistently in work. I set up my own design and marketing agency in the UK about 7 or 8 years ago now. God, time is moving so fast. And ran that, always had worked with small boutique agencies that wanted to go to market. So we'd create very luxurious, websites, UI, UX, and then go to market strategies as well. Then I tried to set up my first coaching business. And at the time, I had a lot of unprocessed trauma, and I had no idea how to regulate my emotions. I didn't know how to feel. So I operated in a lot of numbing patterns. And so at this point, I'm starting to develop an alcohol addiction. And so I'm a high achiever, but with a lot of shit going on beneath the surface. And so I started this first business, and I did all of the classic things that outer authority programs tell you to do, create the landing page, create the perfect marketing. I created the program, I got the photo shoot, I got the branding, I did this, I did it all myself. It took me absolutely ages, eventually finished it. And the one thing that I didn't really do was build an audience because I was terrified. I didn't have a lot of inner authority. I didn't know it was called that at the time. But I didn't have any confidence to do that. So it's the one thing that I avoided. And so by the time I actually did come to launch it, I launched it to crickets. No one signed up, and I took it incredibly personally. And I was like, everyone hates me. No one wants to be around me. It validated a lot of the things that I was already thinking and feeling. I gave it 1 week, and I was so crippled by it that it descended me fully into an alcohol addiction. I decided to shut down that business, and then I shut down my design agency as well. And I went back into corporate, and I continued a high flying corporate career for another 5 years, and eventually decided to move over to Australia because my drinking got so bad in the UK that, I was going out 6 times a week, doing coke, just literally to get through the day. And I had just had this thought when I was there. I was like, I'm not going to be alive if I don't escape this. Like, I'm never going to create a life that I love. I'm never going to find a partner because I'm just trapped in unhealthy cycles. My anxiety
Mm.
is getting worse. I hate who I am. So I was like, okay, easy solution. I'm going to move countries to the other side of the world. So I moved to the other side of the world, the universe fully aligned to like support me in moving over there. And I started working at a company called Canva, and they were a tiny startup at the time. And started working there as a digital designer, and was there for 4 years. And at over the time that I was there, the company really, really exploded, which was incredible. And it meant that when I first joined, there was about 100 of us. When I left, there was about 2,000. So, we switched
Wow.
offices and everything. But in that process, it basically meant that you either evolve and are growing, or you're dying in a startup like that.
Mm.
So a lot of the people that are there at the beginning, it's a very young company, you're given these incredible opportunities to basically grow and to flourish. And so you're put in these leadership positions, and you're given a huge amount of responsibility to cater for this incredibly influential company. And so by the end, by the time I left, I was a lead designer and creative producer for specifically the organic marketing team. So my entire outer authority career has been about outer authority, has been about organic marketing. Even things like if we wanted to do some work on some kind of project within, a company like that, not just Canva, but you'd have to basically put together like a pitch deck and promote your idea to stakeholders within a very few slides. So that's where, I understand how to create very simplistic ways of explaining complex situations, which is what
Yeah.
comes into programs that sells and stuff. But at the time, as I was still doing that, 2 years into being at Canva, I had what can only really be described as a mental health break, where on the outside, no one really knew, but my alcoholism had got even worse when I actually moved to Australia because the drugs weren't good enough to sober me up. So I was just getting
Mm.
sloppy drunk. And so I was starting to get myself in dangerous situations, and all of this is happening behind the scenes. And it got to the stage where I had just lost who I was to such a degree that it had developed this crippling social anxiety, and I created this belief that I'm not confident without alcohol. I have no personality without alcohol. I'm a loser without alcohol. And people were validating that around me. Oh my God, you're so much more fun when you have alcohol. I'd get those kinds of comments all the time, and it fueled this belief inside of me. And eventually it got to a stage where, I was kind of faced with this fork in the road moment. And I was like, on New Year's Eve, I'd come back from a terrible party, and I was sat in my room by myself at 11:30, so it wasn't even midnight yet, and I was there by myself, and I was crying, and I had this thought come into my head, and I was like, oh, I understand why people, decide to take their own lives now. And I sat there for half an hour, and I was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. Like, I think I'm done. And so I called up my mum,
Mm.
and I said to her, I was crying, and I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I know that you're so far away. I don't have anyone over here. I don't know what I can do anymore. And, we were both super emotional. She was trying to help me and everything. And she said, take 3 deep breaths. And so, I
Mm.
took 3 deep breaths, and I didn't realize the relevance of that until probably about 4 months ago, as I've started bringing the breath into everything. But those 3 breaths allowed me to regulate my nervous system and allowed me to see a different perspective, because it takes 3 breaths to reset your nervous system. And so I took those 3 breaths, and I decided, okay, I'm not going to make any decisions today. And I woke up the next day, and I was like, I need to change. Like, if I want to do something, I have to change. And so that was kind of like the pivotal moment for me to start changing. And I went to my work at the time, and they put me on this coaching journey. And in this one session of coaching, I learned more about myself than I did in entire 3 years of therapy that I'd been a part of. And people just, he basically asked me what my favorite color was. And he was like, what's your favorite color? I'm going to follow a hunch here. And I was like, well, I don't know, what's your favorite color? And he was like, no, I'm asking you, what's your favorite color? And I was like, full fight or flight response. Like, my hands went
Mm.
numb, drained, color drained from my face, like everything. I got like tunnel vision, and I'm like panicking because I literally couldn't think for myself. And he eventually was like, it's okay, you don't have to answer, but you have lost yourself to such a degree in the pursuit of success that you now can't even tell me what your favorite color is. You don't have an opinion on anything. You don't know who you are. And I was
Mm.
like, holy shit, like this is what's happened. And so this was kind of this moment of realization where it's like you can have it all, right? On the outside, you can have it all. And a lot of people can create incredibly successful careers with a lot of outer authority, but on the inside, they're crumbling. And you hear this story a lot, right? I had it all, I had this great career, but on the inside, I was crumbling. And that's because it's so standard. Our society literally teaches us that there is one way to become successful, and especially as women, that is to become successful as a man, to do what a man does, to follow the same cycles as men do, and to prioritize climbing the corporate ladder, or to prioritize doing it in the way that you should do, not in the way that feels good for you. And so you start submitting to all of these rules and these requirements of what success is, and every single time that you say yes to those requirements and you do one of those things, you say no to a part of yourself. And so in shadow
Mm.
work, it's like you just start closing off all of these parts of yourself until you're living, in shadow work, we're born as this huge castle, or you've got all of these different doors that describe different parts of the human experience. And as we go through life, we start shutting off all of these doors. And so by the time we're in our like 30s, we're living in this tiny 1-bedroom apartment where we can't be anything, we don't even know who we are anymore. And that's what the majority of the world is living in. And so when I came into the coaching world and I started doing a lot of deepening my authority and figuring out like what it was that I wanted to be known for, everything kept on coming back to authority. Authority is such like a confusing word for a lot of people. They think of police and dominance, but authority
Mm.
actually comes from the word okta, which means author, which is about inner power, creativity, and being
Mm.
able to channel something yourself. And so I started exploring authority and just realized, authority is a being. It's not even a skill. It's a way of being. It's an energy, and ultimately, the authority that you put out is dictated by the energy that you have inside of you. It's a being. And so that's kind of what like stimulated all of it, is that I have experienced the life where I have all of this outer authority, but no inner authority. And number one led to me shutting down an entire business because I couldn't handle the rejection, the judgment, the fear of failure, because I took it all personally, zero emotional intelligence. And number two, it led me to an incredibly successful corporate career where I was getting paid well, like in a great company with loads of benefits, like brilliant, and the most unhappy I've ever been, thinking about whether I even wanted to be here. There is something missing if authority is leading us to that. And my
Mhm.
perception is that authority, real authority, integrated authority, really happens when we combine our soul and our ego, and we become, in the Bible or Mary Magdalene gospel, they call it the true human. That's where we've basically created a load of inner authority, and we are creating outer authority from that place, and it's honest. And then people then go on to create careers with huge amounts of success, but in a way that actually makes them happy, where they want to be doing it every single day. And that's kind of where the concept of inner authority comes from.
I love it because it is so true, especially like the more high achievers that you're around. And I can feel my audience listening to it being like, yeah, I can agree with that. Because when you've been through some type of traumatic event and you have some type of way that you haven't yet healed coping with that, whether that is addiction or that's work or what have you, there's an outlet. But what I've seen with a lot of high achieving women, pretty much every single one of them has had trauma in some type of way. And so we go into the world and we do what a man does, and we look for external approval of, am I a good girl? Did I get good grades? Did I make enough money? Will my parents now approve of me? Can I achieve enough to make this void inside of myself go away?
Yeah.
And you realize the deeper you go, the bigger you go, the void gets a little bit louder. And you get to the top and you get to these things and you're like, oh shit, I thought this feeling would go away. And now it's actually intensified and it's intensified. And now the high doesn't hit as much anymore. And you're sitting there being like, what the fuck? And it comes to that knees on the floor moment when you're like, I can't be here because I don't know how to be here. I don't actually know how to be in my body. And I think that's the pivot where we do start to see feminine leadership start to take the stage. And that's something where you have to sit with yourself being like, I'm not meant to work like a man, one. And also, if you don't heal your trauma, it doesn't matter how much success you have. It will never get rid of that.
Yeah.
It
I
can't.
mean,
And
money,
it'll start to show up in your work.
exactly. Money and success only exacerbates what you already feel, like point blank.
1000%.
Yeah.
1000%. And you'll hit a plateau, like, and not a good one. It's not this like, oh, I'm safe, it's fine. It's this, oh, the high doesn't hit anymore. So what's the next high I can get? And that's usually when we start to turn to other vices. Mine was cocaine and alcohol as well, where I was just like, let me round this up. And then I ended up leaving Thailand because I had the same thing. I was like, I'm literally going to die here if I stay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just need to go to something, and it's going to be a hell of a lot harder because I don't know where it's going to go, but I need to remove myself from the situation to actually see. And still, even then, it was just like, oh, but you have to
Yeah.
actually do the trauma work, the inner work, the shadow
Yeah.
work, the sitting with yourself work. Because then, as you said before this call, it's like, then you can quantum leap like that from a good
Yeah,
place.
exactly. And it's like, we're obviously talking about at the moment inner authority from a perspective of getting to an on your knees moment, where I'm sure that a
Yeah.
lot of people have either experienced that on your knees moment, or maybe they feel like it's coming. But inner authority also, like, if you're just on a scaling journey to build a business, and you want to build $1 million brand or whatever it is, it requires a huge amount of inner resilience, of capacity to hold, of conviction in yourself. And these are all of the things that inner authority is. So like, even if you're actually on the path of, like, you've had the come to your knees moment and you're like, I want to do it differently, the thing that's going to allow you to hold the $1 million business is ultimately your level of inner authority. Like, I could give
Mhm.
people the same strategy for everyone and be like, this is the $1 million strategy, just implement this and you're sweet. And I could give them the copy, I could give them everything, but still people wouldn't be able to achieve it in the same way. Some people may just find it doesn't happen for them. Some people may find that it happens really fast. Some people, it feels almost impossible, and they end up comparing themselves to other people. The reason why this works or doesn't work entirely comes down to inner authority. And so
Mhm.
strategy is an important part. And like, typically if a program's not selling over a period of time, it's a marketing issue, 100%. Like, it always comes down to your words. But like, beyond that, if your marketing is good, it is then an inner authority thing. Because whenever we expand, whenever we grow, the next level version of ourselves, or that next energetic ceiling, as I call it, requires you to become a different version of yourself, where you will either have more pressure, more responsibility, or you need to change. And so at the beginning of your journey, when we're talking about the come to your knees moment, typically the things that need to happen is like, it's entirely change related. So like, I needed to quit drinking alcohol. I needed to become the person who didn't
Mhm.
drink that. And I needed to like grieve the part of myself that was attached to that personality of what I thought alcohol gave me. I need to let go of a lot of friends, drinking friends that didn't serve me anymore. I needed to become the person that felt okay with being sober. I needed to hold that person, because that could give me more time. It could give me more drive. So, that's the change. But when you start like building like a 7-figure business, it's suddenly smaller things that need to change. Like, certain relationships you may need to let go of. Some people may not want to grow with you. You sometimes need to let go of certain clients. You sometimes need, you may need to raise your prices, and some people won't come along with you. You need to hold the capacity to hold more pressure and responsibility with more clients, with more visibility. And this is the layer that, like, if you're not expanding your inner authority in these areas, essentially this all comes down to your window of tolerance for your nervous system. And
Mhm.
like, that's inner authority is like a huge part of that, is just your window of tolerance, and it's a nervous system thing. And it's like, you need to expand that window of tolerance to hold what it is that you want to attract in. So like, whether someone's like right at the beginning of this journey just being like, geez, I just need to like get some inner authority and like completely change the way I do this, or if you're on the scaling journey of like, you know what, I'm at an energetic ceiling where I'm scaling to 7 figures, but like, fuck, I've been stuck at this level for so long. Inner authority. Because there is some
Mhm.
part of you deep inside that either doesn't believe that it can happen, or has a belief system that is in contradiction with the desire that you have with the manifestation. It's a conflicting belief system. And when you have a conflicting belief system, it says, I logically want this thing, but I subconsciously fear this thing. And the fear always wins. And so the conflicting belief systems will often be the thing that stops people creating the life that they want to live, manifesting huge success, and yeah, growing their businesses.
Yeah. And that's something like you and I have even worked through where I'm like, the more love, the more success I have, the less love there is. And so it's like, as successful as I want to become, the deeper in love, it's like, oh, I'm going to fear that. I'm going to block that. And I can see that these things are cock blocking each other right now, because if one happens, then the self-sabotaging beliefs start to come in, or tendencies or that nature. And that's something that like you and I have even had to work through. What is something, when can someone tell that they're in an energetic ceiling and they need to do some energetic work?
Good question. So there's a couple of ways that we can see this. Number one, and the most obvious one, is you've just been sat at a plateau for ages, and no matter what you do, no matter what you invest in, you just can't seem to break through it. And it's very different to like a physical ceiling. Like I can see the ceiling above me right now, and I know that if I wanted to, I could get a sledgehammer. I know where to like aim my, to break through it. But with an energetic
Yeah.
ceiling, the idea is it's invisible. So often we don't know that we have it there. And so we are often, and I see this a lot, like people are doing a lot of mindset work. They're doing a lot of, this work, but still nothing's happening. And it's because there's often like missing pieces to that that's still keeping you trapped, and you just can't see exactly what that ceiling is. And you're not activating the right parts of your body to like actually get rid of it. Because mindset coaching, like I started as a mindset coach. So like this is no shade to mindset coaching, but typically mindset coaching still keeps you in the mind. And like to expand your window of tolerance, you need to expand it in the body. And so there's this like missing piece that a lot of people, they're trying to conceptualize and intellectualize these problems, when actually you just need to go straight back into the body, like take the roof off, and just like literally go into the engine of our body and just like rewire everything. And that's really how you expand your capacity. So that's one thing if you've been plateauing. Another way that you can tell is often you'll actually start going backwards. So if you found like, you've been at a certain level for a while and then suddenly things are getting really, really hard, energetic ceiling. And, the hard thing with this is sometimes it requires you to go backwards to go forwards, because you need to change things, So for example, about a year and a half ago or so now, I decided, I was at 100K cash months consistently in a way of doing business that wasn't serving me. I was back to back on one-to-one calls, and I was just like, I can't have a family like this. I can't have children if I'm this back to back. My business requires so much of me. This isn't scalable. And so, I was at this energetic ceiling where not only could I physically not like do any more because my schedule was jam packed, and that can be another way that you have an energetic ceiling, but that's a little bit more obvious, where it's like I literally don't have capacity like in my calendar to do any more. But on top of that, things started getting really hard. It started feeling harder for me to create content. And this is another way that people can know they're in an energetic ceiling. If things that used to feel easy start feeling hard, something's become out of alignment. And you need to look at that and like shake that, because it's not meant to really feel hard. It's hard work, as in like we work a lot, to hold a 7-figure business. I work a lot, but it's not hard
Yeah.
work. If I'm in alignment, it's easy work because it comes naturally. Content is easy, and that's obviously if you have all of the skills, and then it becomes like a channeled event. Obviously, if you're learning a skill, it's more of like you have to learn the skill, and that's very uncomfortable, and that creates a different kind of hard. But typically, if you're growing a business, it should feel like passion filled. It should feel exciting. And so I was at this stage where like nothing was working. Like it was working, but I just felt completely at like this loggerhead, like trying to move something, to scale something that just was not moving. Content felt really hard. And I kept on getting these pulls, like, you need to shut all of this down. And I had this like another come to your knees moment, this fork in the road is what I call it, where like I was sat in a meditation and I was like speaking to God, and I was like, God, please help me, like just find what it is that I'm meant to do. And I pulled this tarot card, and this tarot card was just basically like, you need to let something go if you want to become the person. It was like the most poignant message. And I was like, holy shit, I know what this means. I know I have to basically shut down 3 parts of my business. And so I decided to shut down 3 parts of my business, and I went back through a void. And it was like this void where like and this is often what happens with an energetic ceiling afterwards, is like, in order to expand your vessel, so after the energetic ceiling, it requires you to expand your capacity. And that can happen again in a variety of ways. So it can happen in the void, and the void requires you to expand your capacity to be patient and to hold tension. That's what patience means. It's literally holding tension and the capacity to hold tension. That's what patience means. And so whenever you're in a place of waiting or being patient, you're expanding your tolerance to hold that discomfort. And so I was in that void, but because I was in the void, I also had a lot of space. So it was in that period that I also decided to buy a house that I bought on a full-time employee. Like, all of these decisions came through because they were suddenly, I had the capacity to make these decisions, even though it didn't logically make sense. And then 3 months later, I
Mm-hmm.
had one of the biggest launches that I've had of my entire career. It created space for the quantum leap. But other ways that people can experience, there's always like a purge that can happen before a quantum leap, and the purge can come in sickness. Before I moved into this house and I became a homeowner of a multi-million-dollar home, that the exact one that was on my vision board, I went through a month of being sick and I was throwing up constantly. Weirdly, me and my partner, we reflected recently that he was actually sick for a month, about 3 weeks before I was. We both went through this month period of like purging, expanding our capacity to hold. Other things that people go through is really painful experiences that cause them, like, their deepest triggers will come up. An event will happen that like makes their entire nervous system like shock, and you have to like, what are you going to do in this moment? There's two choices. You either become a victim to it, you allow it to dictate your reality. Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? And what that does is it makes it last way longer, and you will just go backwards consistently. Or you surrender to it. This is happening for me. Let me surrender to this pain. Let me integrate this pain. Let me sit in the pain, because the only way that we grow is when we sit in discomfort, is when we sit in the pain. When we transmute pain and we turn it into a purpose and we give it something, that's the entire reason we've come here on this world, is literally to turn pain and to feel pain and turn it into purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we surrender to it, what that allows us to do when we feel that pain, you are expanding your window of tolerance to hold something. And that's often then why the quantum leap comes in like 2 days. Everything that
Mm-hmm.
you've been working for it happens so fast, because you have just spent 3 months, 2 months expanding, holding, being patient, sitting in discomfort. And you ask pretty much anyone that's had a quantum leap, they will talk about the quantum crumble that happens before the quantum leap. And it happens almost every time.
Always. Always. I'm literally, as you're talking, I'm like, current season. Like, that is literally what's going on. It's like, but at the same time, being I know. I'm like, noted. This is exactly why we work together. But like listening to it all, it's like when you get to a certain stage, you also know that's exactly what's happening. Where you're like, oh, I'm being taught patience right now. I'm being taught surrender. I'm also being taught to be quiet so I can hear God's next mission. And I think that's what a lot of us do in the void is we make more fucking noise versus sitting and being like, let me quiet to hear why this is happening. A lot of us will drown it out with behaviors or adding more because we think busy means we'll somehow get out of the hole and find our way out of it. We'll scroll more to quote unquote find the answer instead of actually just sitting and being like, no, let yourself be bored, let yourself feel the pain of this, your outer authority being challenged, because that's you. A lot of us in that moment, what I've seen in myself, I've seen it in my clients, I've seen it with so many humans, where it's just like, what is usually happening in that moment of shift and when your energetic capacity is being asked to expand is also when you're being asked to stop relying on your outer authority and you're being asked to pivot and look at your inner authority. And that's when the shift starts to happen, because when you can actually get into that space, that's a different level of capacity to hold. And that's the current season I'm in right now, where I'm like, oh, we got to a certain level, da 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 da, and I feel so good here and it's great. And then I'm like, wait, that the high don't hit anymore. So what do I do? Okay, let me get quiet so I can actually, and like the work we've been doing is let me actually find my inner authority at a different level. It's not that I didn't have it. That's how I got to where I am. And it doesn't mean, oh, I'm back to my drug dealing, domestic violence days. Like, it doesn't have to go to that level. It really can be like, oh, we're at a good level. We're safe. But I know I'm supposed to be at a great level and slightly delusional, which means I have to strip myself of the external validation to actually find that internal authority.
Yes. Okay. I really, really love that you framed it like this. And this is, I have someone in mind that I've been talking to who's, multiple seven-figure, entrepreneur, and is currently like at this energetic ceiling. And I love that you've spoken about, like, in order to go through that quantum leap, it's like you need to actually let go of the outer authority that you've previously known and rely on the inner authority. It's exactly that. It's really, really beautifully phrased. So thank you for bringing that. It's really like, it's bringing me down a whole new thought of path, because it's like, you know, what happens when you have a certain level of success is you know what works. And I think the biggest issue that people experience that holds people back is this fear that if I let this go, I don't trust that I can build it back up in another way. And that is the
Mhm.
thing that stops people from making progress faster. People know, they know what they have to do typically, but the fear of letting go and trusting yourself and trusting your inner authority and trusting the inner wisdom that you have is really scary. And so it makes people stay in businesses that are unaligned for far too long. It makes people continue doing programs or creating offerings that are out of alignment for way too long, even though they're feeling so hard, so that they have more control. Because what happens in an energetic ceiling is there has to be a release of control. There has to be a
Mm.
release of, I know logically in my mind what's going to work. And this is what outer authority is, right? Outer authority is mind led, it's intellect led. It's like my mind tells me that this is going to be good. And when our inner authority and our outer authority aligned, brilliant, you've got fire. But when these two
Mm.
things stop communicating and you do start outgrowing, so your outer authority is, it's like literally they separate. And so your outer authority is over here, your mind is operating over here, but your body and your nervous system, your inner authority is over here being like, we're not aligned anymore. We're not aligned. Like, you've got to line us back up if you want this to be easy. And so, aligned action only happens when these things are like literally on top of each other and they are funneling through each other. But when you are trying to push an outer authority that isn't in alignment anymore, it can't work. That's why it always feels like this uphill battle. And so there is this degree of trust that has to happen with who you are becoming and the future version of yourself. It really requires you to like look to the future and be like, I trust the very small indescribable pulls that I am feeling. And that's scary, right? Because there's no science to describe very explicitly exactly what that is. It's a feeling.
Mhm.
And we have to trust those feelings. But when you do surrender to those feelings, this is where often miracles start to happen. Daily miracles really do become an everyday thing. I can even talk to this personally, even this year. My business I'm very, very known for marketing. My corporate career, it's what I'm known for. But I am also deeply connected to God. I am a very spiritual being. I have been channeling for a very long time now. And I have received so many messages, whether it's from a psychic or whether it's from my own experiences, that like I am meant to be doing something with manifestation, with inner work. And for me, that always felt very edgy and very scary. I was like, I can make it a part of the brand, but should it be the whole brand? Like, I'm scared of that. And so for a really long time, I put that off, and it was working for a while until it wasn't. And then, even just this winter that just came, summer for you guys, I did a launch, which actually ended up being a really good launch, but it was really hard. It was probably the
Mm.
hardest launch that I've done in a long time. Not even because people weren't signing up, they were, but because I felt so out of alignment. And so the content felt hard to create. I can create it, but it was such a push. And I had loads of spirals over that like month period that I was in that launch. And I was like in this peer-led mastermind, and I was literally just like, there must be something that I am shedding right now, because the amount of pain that I am having to go through, I had all of these fears around public failure. What are people going to think and say if I fail publicly? Which it didn't end up being that, but those all of those beliefs and fears came up to the surface for me to like look at. And I just honestly every single day was sat, I have a company called In Awe, and I was just doing my In Awe flows, just like expanding my capacity, using my breath, moving through the emotions. I surrendered to it, you know and I knew as soon as that launch finished, I had a commitment to finish the launch, people come in, it was great in the end. But I was like, I can't go through that again. My outer authority is misaligned. It's unaligned anymore. So now I need to change. I need to pivot. I need to make a decision. So I decided, okay, 3 days time, I'm changing everything. And what do you know? Over the past 3 months, I have completely quantum leapt again in a way, and it's so easy. I'm probably having higher output than I've had in years. Like I'm producing more content, I'm doing more things, I'm
Yeah.
public speaking, I'm running retreats, but it's the easiest that I have felt in my business, with the most ease, with the most simplicity that I have felt in so long. And I literally
Mm.
feel like God's hand like on me, just moving me towards where it is. And this is what aligned action feels like. It's when your inner authority and your outer authority align. But I didn't do that for so long because my ego was so attached to the outer authority that had always worked before. And it's that
Hmm.
attachment that then creates pain, and ultimately I needed to go through that so that I could really fully surrender to, I'm not willing to do that again.
Yeah.
I'm willing to now trust whatever. God, just show me, just show me what I'm missing here. And
Yeah.
yeah, so beautifully described. Thank you for giving me that.
Of course. I mean, that's literally what blind faith is, right? Like God would tell his disciples to just go into the middle of the desert and not give a direction. It was just like, hey, go this way. And they're like,
Exactly.
and is there food? And he's like, get rid of all of your belongings, get rid of everything you have, get rid of all your food, just walk. And they were led to these things where were gifted and granted more abundance than they could have ever imagined. And they had to go through trials and tribulations and still had to surrender to have their faith, to keep walking in faith, to do the things, even though there was never a path. But as humans, because we haven't get evolved and out of this, it's like, let me have that control. Let me somehow have the blueprint. If I can look at 2025 and I can map backwards and I can predict all of this stuff, which is great to have some type of plan, but like you're gripping to it that it has to be that plan, that then you miss God's plan because you're
Yeah.
not actually slowing down to hear, oh, this is the opportunity I'm supposed to go on. This is the kind of thing that I'm supposed to go. And I know this is something like, how can I now evolve into that identity piece of which one it is? Because that's what we're constantly doing if we're actually on God's path. Like we are always stepping into a new layer of which we're meant to be serving, but oftentimes we're gripping, being like, oh, why isn't this happening? Or why can't I bust out of this income? Or why is my relationship like this? Or why is my health like this? And I feel at a plateau. It's like, you're not listening. That's why.
Yeah. 100%. And when you get to a certain level of business, it almost entirely becomes an inner game. Like I know
Mhm.
so much strategy now. I could pretty much do anything that I wanted. If something's not working, it's an inner game. And the same
Yeah.
thing goes for, if you listen to like billionaires talking, a lot of the time it's just emotional intelligence work. Maybe a couple of little tweaks here and there, but it really doesn't become a strategic thing. It becomes like a dynamic thing. So for example, when you are owning a business past a certain point, you need to actually stop becoming the doer, and you actually, Stephen Bartlett, I think, from the Diary of the CEO, said this. He was like, when you own a business at this level, you actually become a glorified recruiter. And
Mm.
when I heard that, I was like, oh, like I don't want to become a recruiter, and so that's my level, right? So like, if I wanted to own a business as big as the Diary of a CEO, it's going to require me to release all of the beliefs that I have around being a recruiter, around my
Mhm.
ability to bring on the right people. Because I used to have a belief that hiring was really, really hard, and then I would often bring on the wrong people. And what does that lead to? Cycles of people coming in and then leaving and blah, blah, blah. And it's frustrating, it's exhausting. Hiring someone is a long process. It's a trusting process, and when you get the wrong people, it's very tiring. And I've had quite a few experiences like that. And it's like, if you hold that belief, what then happens is you isolate yourself in the work, so then you're capped by your own ability to deliver. You are the
Mhm.
blocker, you are always the bottleneck. And that's not something you can move through unless you get rid of that belief, which is your inner authority. And so, again, like, this is all just like, in different businesses, it will be a different thing, but growth and scaling requires you to become something different. And it requires you to
Mhm.
operate differently within the strategy, because the dynamic with which you need to interact with it as the CEO changes. And I think this is
Mhm.
especially prevalent actually for women, because, and I've been having this conversation a lot with people recently, men, operate in testosterone. They go up and down the day. And so it is relatively easy for them to follow a plan and to follow goals, right? And like, it actually just works quite well, like, for them to have a goal at the top of the day, like up, down, up, down, up, down. That's how testosterone works. Women, when we have cyclical cycles, goals, from my experience, really has the same effect, because we have such fluctuating hormones. So at any point during the month, if our goal feels different one day, we don't want it. It actually starts
Mm-hmm.
to feel like a trap for us. It starts to feel like this frustrating thing that we have to do. And we actually, goals can actually, I've seen, will actually send women backwards when they have very strong goals like that. But the same thing, even for like when you're coming into like a CEO role of like a much larger business, the identity that it is required of a woman is actually and should be quite different to the identity of a male CEO. And we also need to adapt to that. And we need to find our flows within that. And if we don't, we end up burning out. We end up feeling like I'm not cut out for business. Things start to feel really hard when there is a way that we can do it. It's just very different. It requires us to act in a different role to what a man does. I've worked with a lot of very successful women who start to feel like because they can't maybe create the same level of output as a man on a day-to-day basis, or aren't as consistent as men on a day-to-day basis, that they are failing in some way. I'm not good enough. But actually our power just lies in a different place. It's just that
Mm-hmm.
society has shown us that successful entrepreneurs look like this, and this is the way it should be. And it's like, actually, for a woman, if we can actually honor our cyclical nature and create a role and step into the role and become that role in the way that is best for us, we will find so much more success.
Mm-hmm. I a thousand, and have found the more that you heal, the harder it is to play like a man, because
Yeah.
it's that identity that starts to shift. Because in the beginning it's like, oh, my trauma fueled me because I'm so hyper in my masculine, because I'm in my protector role, I'm in my linear survival limbic system. And the more healing that you
Mm,
go on, what I've seen with humans and clients is like the, oh, but now I don't know how to show up, I don't know how to do things. And I'm like, you do, it's just very different. Like it's a different part of your brain, it's a different part of your heart. Like it's using your intuition as a woman, as a feminine leader, which it's a beautiful thing. It's not a shameful thing. It's just very different. And it creates, this is why, like, I'll even talk with my like partner about this, being like, women are such better company. Like we run companies so much better. And he'll
yeah.
sit there and he's like 1,000%. A thousand
Yeah.
percent. Like men work
Everyone does.
horses, like hire them to get it done. But like as the visionary, as the person to lead it, that is the woman. Because if you think about it, back in tribal times, like that is what women did. We looked at the moon, we went with our cycles, like we literally led tribes. We were medicine
Yeah.
women, just putting things together, guiding tribes. They would listen to our intuition. And over time, we did just become a linear cycle. Like, if you think about it, it's like the shape, even like we used to go like with the moon, like we were rounded, we were more full, we were in those kind of things. We had all this like, femininity and flow. And then all of a sudden, like this masculine paradigm that's very linear, get skinnier, like do things like that. Like it's taken over, like work like a man. And it's like, that isn't how it's supposed to be. Nothing's wrong with you when that starts to happen. It's just you're
100.
trying to find a new driving force, which means a realigned inner authority to make it actually happen.
Exactly. It's ultimately fuel, and the thing
Yes.
that fuels us for the first few years of business, it was for me, is trauma. Typically,
Yeah.
it's this fuel, and there's often no better fuel. And I've heard even Alex Hormozy talk about this. He talks about like there is a certain degree of fire that like the desire to be approved of and to prove other people wrong will give you to
Yeah.
achieve something. But ultimately, if you go down this path, which I recommend everyone does, because that typically doesn't lead to happiness, that route, it leads to, especially for
Mm-hmm.
women, when we go through a cycle, if we have a low month, the part in our month where our hormones dip and our mood dips, literally from my perspective, just shows us the honesty of how we're really feeling. That's what happens. That's
Mm-hmm.
all that happens. It just shows us, how are you really feeling? Let's bring up all of this stuff, and you can either face it and look at it or not. And so, that fuel that we have, eventually when you heal a certain amount, it changes. And so then suddenly the fuel of like, oh, I actually don't want to make this to be approved of anymore. Like I don't need that anymore. And then it creates this like
Mm-hmm.
identity paradigm as well, because it's like, okay, well, what does drive me? Because I still want the successful business, but I'm really struggling to get myself to do the work because I don't have that trauma response anymore. And there's this like recalibration that needs to happen. And that recalibration often looks like releasing the trauma and coming back to what is the mission that you've come here to give, becoming so deeply connected to what you have come here to do and to release into the world. If you're spiritual, what's the message that spirit has given you? If you're religious, what's the message that God has given you to deliver? And becoming so devoted to that. And for me, it's looked like I don't have routines. I don't have a morning practice. I have a devotional practice, not just to me, but to my relationship to spirit, but to my mission
Mm-hmm.
as well. It's like, how can I always make sure that I am on path with what it is that I'm meant to be bringing out? And, at the moment, that message is inner authority and bringing that inner authority out. It's becoming its own business. It's like, I'm always asking and checking in, is the action that I'm taking aligned? Is it aligned with the path that I'm meant to go on? There's no more ego, I want this to prove this anymore. It's like, am I devoted to this path? If yes, I will do the work. I will do the work. And that then becomes the fuel. And that is the most aligned fuel because it's literally driven by spirit. And so we
Mm-hmm.
are, you were just talking about women, basically being channels, right? We channel through the creative energy, and then the men around us can, like, take that vision and like make it into something, which is great. And obviously we have a certain amount of like testosterone to do that as well. But the only way that a woman can be fully a channel to receive all of the wisdom of the universe that we have access to is to not be driven by trauma, is to not be driven by ego. The fastest results that you will see is when you are a channel that doesn't have any clutter. And the way that I talk about the channel is like, imagine it as a river. And we all have one of these channels. If you have a lot of trauma, you're going to have a lot of debris in that river. It's like a storm has come through and has just put all of these like logs and trees and leaves and everything, and it just clogs up the river. And so in the end, what you end up having is stagnation. You have a stagnated energy. And so you just have all of this like, debris and clutter. Nothing's really moving. Water starts to pool. Energy is not flowing in that respect. But when you start to remove the debris, the trauma, the ego that's blocking the channel, the energy starts to flow again. The water starts to flow. And that's where things start dropping in. Spirit can come through way louder. You're more in tune with your body. That's another really big thing of like inner authority, is like how connected to you are you with your body, because intuition is a really big part of this. But it's that entire process of just clearing the vessel. And the channel that I'm talking about is the vessel. Everything's the vessel. In this entire life we have come to expand our vessel, but most people don't. The majority of the world
Mm-hmm.
has a clogged vessel and lives their life that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of have this decision, how much joy and pleasure and wealth do we want in this life? And it's going to come down to how clear your vessel is.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was so good. I want to dive into, okay, let's how to unplug it, the vessel, and all kind of things. But I feel like that can be a whole other podcast episode. This was
100%.
so freaking good. I know. I'm like, we'll have to do another one. This
Yeah.
was so good. Is there anything that's on your heart that's coming through of like just what wants to come through?
I think the biggest thing is, don't be afraid of discomfort and pain. And for a really long time, I was, as someone that had a lot of active trauma. I had active PTSD that ended up coming up when I quit drinking alcohol. And I was really afraid of pain. I was really afraid of discomfort. And a lot of people are, especially high achievers, because they worry, and this is what happened to me, that if they surrender to the pain, that they are going to become trapped in the pain. And that was what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I feel this too much, I'm never going to be able to get out of it. But the reality is, emotions are meant to be emotion. They are meant to emotion. They're meant to be in motion. And the only way that we can move through emotions and trauma, which is essentially stuck emotion, is to feel them. And so don't be
Mm-hmm.
afraid of the discomfort. Like, you will never get lost in a feeling. Ironically, the only time that you will become lost in a feeling is if you resist it. It will last for 20 years unless if you feel it. And so you will
Mm-hmm.
experience 20 minutes of pain, but what you will grow on the other side of feeling that pain is wisdom. That's what feeling pain and discomfort allows you to do. And more parts of your soul will come into your body as your vessel expands. And that's exactly what it is. So don't be afraid to sit in discomfort and feel the discomfort, because there's always magic in that.
Mm, that lands for sure. Thank you, my dear.
You're so welcome. As
Where can
usual,
the
this just felt like 5 minutes.
I know. I was like, what the heck? That's why when I looked at the time, I was like, oh, I could ask you like 3 more questions. I'm like, damn, it's already been an hour. Where can people connect with you, learn about you, fall in love with you,
Um,
all the things?
things. I am at Hayley June Lloyd on Instagram. I have the Hayley Lloyd podcast. If you're just interested in manifestation stuff, It is in awe, INAWE manifestation on Instagram. It's a very new Instagram account. It's much larger on TikTok, but that's where we're going to be creating a new app that's coming in 2025. So if you want to follow along on that journey and just get the manifestation inner authority stuff, that's entirely there. If you have a business that you're scaling, at Hayley June Lloyd is where you want to be.
And she's a genius in all things. So please go subscribe. We'll put it all in the show notes and all the things. But thank you, thank you, thank you. Yay. And as you guys know, make sure you subscribe, rate, review, all the fun things. It helps us get more incredible people like Hayley on this podcast. We have new episodes every single Monday. So go binge, go, peruse around and enjoy. And we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Girl, bye.